So let's begin. Again, welcome. You're in the right place if you're here for the financial marketing webinar, create and optimize your content for maximum reach. A little bit about our speakers today. Alexandra Levis, she is the CEO and the founder of Arro Financial Communications. They are a PR and a marketing agency, and they specifically specialize in growing AUM and AUM growth strategies for asset management clients. And I won't even get into all the AUM that both Stephen and Alex have raised, but she's been involved personally in over 40 ETF launches and has a long history in this space. And then for Stephen, I always read this in his bio, and it says, he has 25 years of digital marketing experience. Well, what does that mean? I mean, it essentially means Stephen's been at this since the internet was started. So that is a long time. When he founded Zero Company, he still serves as the CEO. He founded it back in 2001. So he's seen a lot change in this space. And as well, it's a vertical that Zero Company specializes in. And we won't, again, like I said, get into like the hundreds of millions, probably billions at this point of AUM that both Alex and Stephen have been able to create. But what's special about this combination is it really does pack a powerful 1-2 punch with the PR, with the content, with the communications piece, the media relations. That is one incredible and important side of marketing business, obviously, as many of us know. And as well with Zero Company focusing on the digital marketing side, the paid side, as well as SEO. You need, as we know, we need all of those. So we do have a special offer for you that we want to make sure you get. Now, to get this, this is important. We want you to still be here, to be eligible for it, to enter into receiving it. We want you to be here still at the Q&A. And if you submit a question, that'll give you an extra entry into receiving this offer. And again, if you want to get in touch with us, maybe later, please feel free to do so. Really simple, either give us a call at either of these numbers. You can reach out to Ashley at zerocompany.com, or you can also reach directly out to Alex at alevis@arrowcom.com. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? A lot of these really burning questions that you're challenged with when it comes to creating, optimizing, distributing content. What do you write about? How much do you produce? Why should you produce it? And how do you get the content out there to the audience that you want? Another thing that we're going to cover, and you'll want to stick around for this in Stephen's session. We did a little study, and then you'll want to see how we generated 173% increase in organic traffic for our investment management clients in 2020. So Stephen's going to get into a little bit more of the details on that. But let's talk about you. It is our goal here today to really help you become that AUM superhero, right? This is what we want to help you with. And we know it's an incredible challenge, particularly with the environment that we're in. Many of our marketing levers are not present, and so we've had to quickly shift, right? There's tons of noise out in this space, which we'll again cover a little bit later on with some statistics as far as the product proliferation that we've seen. But again, to make sure that the chat is working, I have a question for the audience. How many messages would you say an individual is seeing each day in 2021? Just a guess. Throw it here in the chat. It'd be really interesting to see your thoughts about how many messages an individual is seeing or receiving each day. Any responses? See, I'm not seeing any. Well, the answer to the question here is, and this is from Nielsen, that on average, most people are going to be shown anywhere from 4,000 to 10,000 messages each day. So just think about how difficult it's really going to be to recall seeing a particular message. On top of that, there's a number of problems that we deal with as marketers, right? Maximizing the effort from content ideation to brainstorming, differentiating oneself and avoiding that sea of sameness that tends to happen here in this vertical. The optimization of this content so that our owned media is working as well as it can for us. And then it can be quite intimidating when we see the mountain of what's ahead of us when it comes to creating this content and getting it out there, and then also converting that content into AUM. So again, there's no real better way to get started than knowing a little bit about your audience. So I want to launch a poll here. We'd like to know, which aspects of content marketing are you most interested in hearing from us today? So I'm going to launch this poll, and we're going to give it just a few seconds to see some of the responses as they come in. So let us know there, which aspects of this content marketing are you most interested in hearing from us today? And we'll make sure to emphasize that as we go through this. So great, our poll results are coming in. Looks like in the lead is content ideation, so that's great. Here, I'm gonna close the, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, content optimization, nearly 70%. So let me close the poll here, and now I am going to share this with you there. So can you see the results of the poll?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Wow, so some pretty interesting results there with content optimization and content ideation being the first there. So that's quite interesting. Now, one other thing we're curious about, let me hide those results, is when it comes to the optimization and the ideation, also, how many pieces of content are you, how many pieces of content would you say you've produced in the last year? Be kind of curious to see here. Let me launch this next poll. So we know that ideation and optimization are important to you, but then we're also curious about the ability to, okay, more than 20. Okay, this is fantastic. All right, I'm gonna give it about another 5 seconds to get the results in, and I will close the poll here so that we can share these results. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let me close that and then share the results here with you. So 64% of you have said more than 20, and that's not including just fact sheets and commentaries on a monthly basis. So that's fantastic. So now I'm going to turn this over to Alex. She is going to get into getting your content created, optimized, and distributed, how to generate those ideas, which we saw is important to you, and what topics and what kinds of content are most important. Alex?
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here with you today. So just to kick everything off, and I think this dovetails very nicely with the poll results that we just saw. Where do you get started? How do you figure out how to really kick off your content campaign? And we like to always start with content ideation. So when you think about content ideation, when you think about idea generation, we find a lot with our clients that it's trying to really kind of get these main concepts down, and that seems to be the hardest place to start. So one of the things that we really pay attention to is being on trend or being on topic. So one way to think about that is, what is happening in the news cycle that your company, your products, your services can speak to? One thing we do know about content marketing is that people don't just want to be spoon-fed information about the characteristics of your ETF or your mutual fund. They want to think contextually about how this product is a solution to what's been happening in the world. So one way to think about that is what's timely, what's in the news, and what's trending and related to your fund. So a good example of that is we have a new administration right now, and the Biden administration has just talked about an infrastructure proposal that would include a provision for green collar jobs. And one way to think about that is if you have an ESG fund or mutual fund or an ETF, how does this impact sustainable investing strategies? So again, it's taking a big picture concept, something that's happening in the news, and tying it back to your product or your service. Another way to think about being on trend is, thinking about what are some of the main themes that are discussed in your industry. In the ETF space, the age-old debate of active versus passive is something that, regardless of how many pieces of content are written about it, people can't seem to get enough. So again, pieces that are constantly evergreen or constantly trending are another great way to think about how to kick off your idea generation. The other thing we want to think about, and I know Stephen's going to talk about this a little bit later, is prioritizing relevant keywords. We'll talk about this a little bit further down the road, but really thinking about connecting the right keywords both in the body of the piece as well as the headline. And then the last and probably the most important thing to think about is knowing your audience and their challenges. When we think about different audiences, at least in our business, we typically get asked to write for three main groups of people. The first one would be institutions, very highly sophisticated. The second main group, and probably where we see the most demand, are financial intermediaries. So these could be home office decision makers, wirehouses, RIAs, independent broker-dealers, and broker-dealers. And when we think about financial intermediaries, it's really important to kind of split them up because, as we know, some of them have discretion and some don't have discretion. So depending on their level of sophistication and whether or not those advisors need to communicate ideas to their end clients will really determine the level of sophistication and the tone that you're going to be using. And finally, the third group, and particularly in the world of ETFs, which are all about democratizing access to investing, is the retail clients. And so we know with the retail audience, we don't want to assume everybody has a bachelor's in finance. We need to be very realistic about the fact that some concepts are very complex and we need to find ways to distill them and to simplify them and to make them approachable. So the first step that we do when we're writing a piece of content for a client is the first question we ask is, who is a target audience? And now the second thing to really think about is once you've established a general topic and once you've really thought about your audience, now we have to think about what medium of information do people want to consume your information in. Now, not everybody wants to read a long white paper. Not everybody wants to watch a video. Some people want to dive into a 20-pager. Some people want to read a tweet. Some people want to get an email blast. So because we're speaking to so many kinds of people and everybody has a different preference, it's really important to diversify the content formats. So a couple of examples, obviously not completely exhaustive, but I would say that these are definitely the highest in demand pieces. So we have white papers, we have animated videos. Animated videos are great. They tend to be shorter. They're definitely made for a busy on-the-go individual, particularly a retail investor. And it's really a great way to spoon feed somebody information in a couple of minutes or less. And not to mention that videos are entertaining and they have a little bit of a viral aspect that a white paper just doesn't have. So animated videos are great, particularly for the retail audience. One-pagers. We actually get a lot of requests for one-pagers. They could be anything that's a little more graphic heavy, like the example below, or they could be a little bit more text heavy. But one-pagers are particularly great when you have, pre-COVID, you have your sales team on the road and they have some leave behinds for their financial advisor clients. A one-page is a really nice way to distill that information. Monthly commentaries. Now we love monthly commentaries because they're a really great way for a PM to weave in, their investment approach and their investment philosophy. And because they're monthly and they have to be constantly updated, it gives people, potential investors, a reason to keep coming back to your site and learn what the latest analysis or what the latest perspective is from the portfolio manager. So it's a really nice way to give a unique voice to your specific investment philosophy.
And now it's just a comment really on this with the monthly commentaries where you were speaking about the advisors, the wealth management, when they need to communicate what is going on to their end investors, these monthly commentaries are like hotcakes, being able to help them transmit what is going on in a particular product, fund, or strategy.
Absolutely. And then we also have tear sheets. Now tear sheets are something that, every ETF marketer, every mutual fund marketer is very familiar with tear sheets. They tend to get updated monthly or quarterly, but they're really just the facts and figures. One kind of word of caution with the tear sheets is that we always recommend that they're accompanied by either an investment case or a one-pager or something that tells a little bit more of the story. But the tear sheet, of course, is a great job, using facts and figures to tell the performance story of a product.
And in particular, when we're talking about tear sheets, when we see some of the sites that we've audited, not having an updated tear sheet or fact sheet for that particular quarter really hurts, right? It limits the amount that investors can go, or that advisors or visitors to the site will go back to your site. So having those sometimes, go ahead.
No, 100%, Mike. No, that's definitely right. You know, the last thing you want is to give the appearance that you're behind on your reporting or that you're behind on your updating. And so the last thing you want, of course, is to have somebody Google you, get to your site, click on your fund page, get to your tear sheet, only to find something that's outdated. You know, talk about not making a great first impression. So 100%, you want to make sure, and from a content standpoint, honestly, it's very low hanging fruit. Once your fund administrator sends you the data, you want to make sure you get it up and updated as quickly as possible. And it really just inspires confidence to the potential visitors of your site that your performance numbers are up to date, your marketing materials are up to date. And I think, you know, that's just another way of putting your best foot forward.
Without a doubt.
And finally, and this is probably my favorite one, infographics. You know, infographics are a great way, especially in financial services, to tell a story, you know, using data, using data visualization. And so in this particular example, this is something that we did that gives an overview of the ETF ecosystem, which is, you know, pretty hard to navigate, pretty complex. And what's so great about infographics, especially in the world of mutual funds and the ETFs, is they're a great way to break down complex, you know, investing processes, complex investing ideas in a way that's digestible. And infographics are honestly something it's kind of a party pleaser. They're great with institutions, financial intermediaries, and the retail clients.
And Alex, this actually looks incredible as far as in-depth. If somebody wanted to get this from you, where could they look to download this?
Yeah, absolutely. We would love to email you a copy. If you want to go ahead and just send us an email, alevis@arrocom.com. We'll make sure you get a copy, something that you can download, something that you can share, something you can incorporate in your presentations if it's useful. This is honestly something that's been used time and again by different individuals within the ETF industry.
And then Alex, we've also seen blogs gain in popularity here recently. What have you seen to be some of the best practices?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think when it comes to blog topics, you know, those are the ones that probably have the most frequency. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit further down the road, but blog pieces are great because they're short snippets, not as short as a tweet, of course, but, you know, short snippets that still go pretty in depth on a specific topic. And they're a great way to diversify from your core competency. So it's very common to see blog topics about, you know, greater topics that are greater than your fund, topics that are greater than your business or service. And because they get updated relatively frequently relative to other content pieces, they're a great way for people to keep coming back to your site. Personally speaking, you know, at our agency, we've been blogging for a couple of years now, and we've gotten a lot of incoming inquiries because people have been seeing our blogs and have been signing up on them. So from personal experience, anecdotally speaking, this is something that's helped us a lot. And we know with our clients, when they send us their metrics, their blog posts are definitely getting a lot of views. I think, you know, in an age where everyone's doing a lot of their own self-directed research, people are coming to your site and they're expecting to be spoon-fed information. I think a blog is a great way to do that.
Got it. So it's something we definitely need to prioritize. Excellent. So we've just covered, you know, a number of the tools that can be created. What do you have to say or suggestions that you have for the audience on styles?
Yeah, I mean, we really like to think about when we're working with our clients and they have, you know, a whole like inventory of content that they want to be working on. It's really important to think about them in two big buckets. One would be educational and one would be more product specific. For the educational pieces, the reason why we love those is they tend to have a longer shelf life because they don't typically include product tickers. And anyone out there knows that anytime a ticker is included, you're going to have compliance. And if you talk about performance, it's something that's going to need to be updated often. So from a time management and money management standpoint, these educational pieces that have a longer shelf life don't have to be updated often, can be repurposed multiple times. They're a great way to keep your content out there and make sure that you're hitting, you know, those kind of trend topics we talked about, right? Like active versus passive. that's not necessarily something that needs to be updated often because it has a very sustainable shelf life. Of course, we're all out there trying to, drum up AUM and get people really interested and excited about individual products. So in those particular cases, we do want to focus on product specific pieces. And it's not just about talking about, all the different characteristics of why your fund is so great, but it's really focusing on how your fund, your mutual fund, your ETF, your advisory service is a solution to a client problem. Of course, when it comes to product specific pieces, the caveat is that compliance is going to be very heavily involved. So when it comes to those sorts of pieces, once something is compliance approved, best practices dictates that you try to optimize it and reuse it as much as possible. So let's say you have a white paper that's product specific that's been approved by compliance, maybe shorten that into a blog post, split it up into tweets, shorten it into an email blast. Try to find ways to reuse and optimize pieces that have had to go through the rigor of compliance.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuances there to really be aware of and to think about as you're getting into it. So
absolutely.
What are some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So here are a couple. These are actually real life examples that real life ideas that we've pitched to clients in the past. So just to give you guys, ways to kind of just get the juices flowing, ways to really be thinking about these on trend and timely topics. So one example of an educational piece that we did for a client was 5 different ways to invest in gold. So this was a 1-pager. It was not fund specific. It had a long shelf life. It's something the client can use over and over again. And this piece in particular dove into giving investors a roadmap for all the various ways to establish exposure to gold so they can determine what's best for them. And what was so great about this was that we know, and again, anecdotally speaking from the client, it was something they were able to bring to road shows, to conferences. It was something that their salespeople and distribution teams were able to, email out or maybe show during a webinar presentation. And so again, these pieces that are with the aim of educating and not selling, that's really what we're going for. Another example, again, longer shelf life pieces, but now in this time talking about more of a blog series format. This is something that we've heard a lot in the industry is, how can ETF issuers and mutual fund companies, how can they really create content that helps financial advisors? So one thing that we pitched to a client was practice management for RIAs, best practices for 2021, taking a closer look at all the different ways that RIAs can grow their businesses and remain relevant. And again, it's really putting the ETF issuer, the mutual fund company, putting themselves in the shoes of the financial advisor and really thinking through their different, challenges. So, competition, transitioning into, service as a differentiator, the fact that they have to prioritize both the investment management side and the client management side. And again, this is just another way to really show your audience that you're thinking about them and you're being very, cautious in how you present the information to them. So this blog series was something that our clients, the feedback that we got was that it was very successful because it gave them a way to differentiate content that was very specific to financial advisors, very relevant to their needs. And now the last piece of example is the ETF ecosystem, which we had on the previous slide. Again, this was an infographic. It's something that's been circulated widely throughout the industry. And I think the reason is because it's not a white paper. It's not a tear sheet. It's not just about the facts and figures. It's really using data visualization to tell a story. And in this particular instance, we were showing the industry, giving a 10,000-foot overview of the ETF ecosystem. And it's something that was particularly useful to the capital markets teams who were explaining ETFs to new entrants to the space.
So Alex, there's actually a really interesting question here that was posed to us about the content. We know that the annual big ideas are something that asset managers sort of throw around, so it pertains to that. So is an annual big ideas publication like ARC's Big Ideas 2021 an important type of content to produce? How can content like this, drive more engagement?
Absolutely. I mean, if you have the capabilities to create like one big annual report, it's definitely something we recommend. And of course, you want to make sure that you publish it early enough in the year so that it still has, you're still at the very, very top of the trend. I think what's really important to think about with these annual reports is they are going to take a lot of time. They are going to take a lot of money to put together. So that being said, you want to make sure that you can repurpose it as much as possible. I know we're going to get into this a little bit later with Stephen and optimizing content, but just really thinking about all the different ways to distribute that content, and almost more importantly, how to slice up that content. Again, you want to make sure that if it's something you post on your site, maybe you want to slice it up as well and use it as part of an email blast campaign. Maybe you want to slice it up and use it as part of some LinkedIn posts. The idea behind all of this is it's really hard to come up with good content that's always fresh and always relevant and is compliance approved. So you want to make sure that you're squeezing every dollar out of that content piece as possible.
And as a point of creating differentiation, Alex, how would you say someone could leverage this in relation to their investment process or their analysis process when they're creating this content about big ideas?
So I think what the challenge is, the challenge and the opportunity is that you want to make sure that you're not being you're not an infomercial, you're not being too product pushy, and you want to make sure, but at the same time, you want to make sure that the big ideas in the report that you're putting together support your products and your services. So I think that's the biggest challenge, and I know that once we find that balance with the client, it's going to be a great piece. But I think the challenge is always making sure that the content is relevant both to the person reading the content and to the firm producing the content. Otherwise, it's a little too one-sided where it's a little too salesy, or maybe the marketing department isn't really getting what they want out of the piece. So in these particular instances, we really want to make sure that content marketers really think through how can we connect what we're doing to the wider story? How can we connect our products and our services to things that are already being talked about, already being tweeted about, already being written about in the media, already being talked about on CNBC? And that's when we really start to see the engagement.
Perfect. So we want to hear from you at this point. We know many of you are producing quite a number of pieces of content. I want to just launch our next poll here and ask the question, what kinds of content is your company producing today, from the list that Alex shared with us? Let us know your responses. And Alex, I guess one question while this poll is being filled out, there's a mountain of things that you just listed for us there. How have you seen clients work with you and your firm to try to balance that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest questions that I get from people all the time as they're trying to grow their marketing teams is, do I outsource this? Do I hire an individual to work on this? And obviously, there's different ways to get to success. Obviously, the clients that we work with will outsource a lot of pieces to us. What is great about outsourcing, I would say, is that you get a fresh perspective, you get a different set of eyes. The biggest challenge we've seen with clients who come to us and say, hey, we want to do a content marketing campaign, we don't know where to start, is internal teams tend to get really tripped up, by certain ideas, and they can't seem to move past them. So outsourcing is obviously a great option if you want to get some fresh perspective, some fresh content, and some ideas that maybe haven't been kicked around internally. All of that being said, you want to make sure that the outsourcing firm that you work with can not only handle the content, but the graphics or the animation or the web development portion, of course, depending on what the content piece is. We do find that by and large, a lot of our clients will have maybe one or two internal content marketers and will outsource the rest. So we're seeing really either a hybrid model where it's internal and external, or where it's completely outsourced.
Got it. Perfect. That's a great way to cover it, right? You got to be able to balance it out and see sort of what works. Now, here are the poll results. One of the things I'm really pleased to see is that over 64% of the audience today is producing videos and infographics. And from some of the research, that we've looked at, we've seen that consumers, right, or consumers of content want videos. So that's really good to see the consistency there with what's being produced and what is desired by these different audiences. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll now here. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Hopefully everyone can still see my screen there. Give me 1 second. Perfect. Thank you. And then we'll move on to the next part. So we're getting your content created, right, and optimized. Now, how much to produce, when to produce it?
Oh yeah, another great question, and another big question that we get from clients. So we've kind of come up with a little cheat sheet at our agency, which really thinks about your content in buckets. Not everyone's going to want a white paper every single day. That's obviously just not realistic. So it's important to be very realistic about what you can expect people, how quickly they're going to consume the information, as well as balancing that with how quickly your team and your compliance can create the information. So if we think about things from a daily, weekly, monthly by monthly, and quarterly or semester standpoint, from a daily standpoint, what we're really seeing is social media posting, right? I mean, it's a great way, social media, despite it having to be completely regulated by compliance in our industry, social media is a great way to react to what's happening to the news, to the day's events, to, webinars or conferences that you're going to be attending. So the thing that we really recommend from a daily standpoint and a daily touch point with your potential clients is social media posting. In our universe, that tends to be LinkedIn and Twitter. We also recommend that you change up the post. You don't just cut and paste the LinkedIn post and cut and paste that into your Twitter page, but you want to kind of keep them differentiated because they are two different audiences. Now, from a weekly standpoint, blogging is a great tool. As I talked about a little bit earlier, we've really seen the benefits of blogging. We've seen a lot more people coming to our site that wouldn't have originally. And it's one of those blogs are, one of those pieces that, you're not demanding too much. They're not too long. And again, expecting someone to read a white paper every week is just not realistic. So blogs are nice, they're short, they're concise, although they still are able to dive relatively deeply into a topic. And again, most importantly, they give people a reason to keep coming back to your site. When it comes to creating mutual fund websites and ETF websites, most of the information on there is pretty stale. So in order to give people a reason to increase traffic on your site and keep coming back, the weekly blogs are a great way to do that. Then we're moving on to
sorry to interrupt you. I think we just covered this real quickly, but Lee was asking which apps or platforms do you recommend for social media for content publishing?
So Hootsuite is something that we'd recommend. And so if you're, every ETF and mutual fund marketer out there that I know is juggling multiple hats, juggling multiple projects, trying to get things out on deadline, trying to time everything. So, remember, it's very easy to get organized. Something like Hootsuite is a great way to schedule your posts. And again, make sure that what you have going out that week or that month or however far out you schedule things, it's a great way to give an indication of, okay, we have something scheduled 2 months from now. I also know we have a conference 2 months from now. This is all consistent. This is all going to make a lot of sense. So it's a great way to stay organized. And particularly if you have a busy day and you don't have time to log in and manually post something, it's a great way to make sure that there's no mistakes there.
Got it. Thank you for that answer. So I just want to be a little mindful of time. We're about 35 minutes in. So when it comes to planning the timing, Alex, what points would you want to bring out for our audience there?
Yeah, I mean, again, just be very realistic with the project scope. So, you want to make sure that you have enough lead time for your writing team to draft the piece, outline, and then draft the piece. You want to make sure that internal stakeholders have time to review it. You want to make sure compliance has enough time to review it. So it's really important to make sure everyone's on the same page with regards to a deadline. One way to organize yourselves and to plan effectively is to create a content calendar. Think 3 to 5 months ahead, where you can really start to kind of schedule out the different content formats and the styles that we talked about. One word of caution there is you want to leave wiggle room so you can react quickly to market changes. I think one of the challenges of being a financial marketer is, we're not marketing things in a vacuum. The world is changing, the markets are changing constantly, and we want to be reactive to that. And, I think it's a great way to show that the clients that we represent are approachable because they're paying attention to what's happening in the world. So make sure when you have a content calendar that you have enough wiggle room and you have enough breathing room to be able to react quickly to market changes in case, something new comes out. And finally, you want to give yourselves enough time to make sure that your SEO team, has enough time to review anything so that they can ensure optimization. And so you want to make sure the right keywords are there, as well as some of the other pieces that Stephen's going to be talking about. And again, it's all doable, it's all manageable, but it's all about just making sure your timelines are set so that all relevant stakeholders can weigh in.
So that is an incredible amount of insight when it comes to that ideation piece that folks were looking for and the formats to do that in. So Alex, thank you so much for sharing those. And like you said, we want to hear from Stephen now. There's nothing worse than getting all that content written, hitting post, and then seeing no visitors. So Stephen, what do we need to do to get traffic to our site? Or I guess I can maybe cover some of these points as to maybe why it's so difficult to
Yeah,
get
we got to cut through the noise is the key thing there, Mike. And there's a lot of it.
There is a lot of it. Thank you, Stephen. There is a lot of noise. The competition is steep. So we were looking at some data. We were looking at some data that we wanted to share with you. So in the prior year, there's over 8,000 mutual funds currently available to investors here in the States. And on a percentage basis, nearly half of households already own a mutual fund. So there's very little room to continue growing there. And then from the ETF side of the house, there are nearly, or now there are over 2,000 ETFs in the US. And actually, I'm curious to hear from our audience, since the end of 2020, so just this year, year to date, let me know in the chat, what do you think is the number of ETFs that have launched in 2021? So how many ETFs have launched in 2021? I'll keep moving on with the content, but I'll come back to give you that statistic a little bit later. We've seen the ETF space grow. Like I said, funds are flowing into the ETF space, and ETFs continue to grow as an available vehicle. And an additional challenge that's providing noise to this space is the private equity side of things. Since the middle of 2014, we have started to see not only the number of deals being done in private equity go up, right, to less than 400 back in 2014 to now close to 1,600 private equity deals each month, and then the assets flowing into those. So again, there's a lot of oxygen being taken out of the environment by all of these products. So the space is really crowded. It's a tall mountain to climb when it comes to getting your traffic seen. So now we'll turn it over to Stephen. He's going to share how we've helped our clients in the past.
Yeah, so as Mike showed, there's a lot of noise out there. So we've created great content. Now, how do we maximize exposure? So we're going to look at a lot of areas. The first one we're going to look at, though, is SEO. We did some research. First, we looked at our clients, at ETF issuers who were not doing SEO last year, and we tallied up their organic traffic. We saw that the average growth in this group was 9% on their organic traffic. So we weren't providing any SEO services for this group of ETF issuers. We then took it a step further. With some of our tools, we pulled in data for over 1 billion organic sessions. That's thousands of days worth of organic traffic estimates for a variety of non-client ETF issuers, all different sizes. We looked at their estimated traffic for the last couple of years. The average growth in organic traffic for that group was also 9%, and that even included ARC, which had a pretty good spike. Then we looked at the ETF providers that are our clients that we did SEO for last year. Their average increase was 173%. So massive growth, and we were really able to get the most out of their content. So
that is an incredible statistic, Stephen.
Yeah. So how do we do that? Typically, there are 3 ways we're working with content. First, sometimes the content is already live and we're fixing things. This is a problem because maybe we want a different URL than was used, and now you get to mess with redirects and link changes, and any changes we make to the content have to run back through compliance again after the fact. So that's common. We do that a lot. But the second way we work, and this is one of the more preferred ways, is as the content is being written. It's then sent to us for review, and optimizations are made prior to going to compliance and prior to going to live. So we can make all the tweaks in the middle of that process and have it prepped for SEO. Then the third way we are involved is prior to the content even being created, and providing keyword research, and even directing what keyword it should be. So the content may be written specifically to rank on just a single keyword. So now there are a ton of optimizations you can do on and off site, and rather than go through all those, because that could take a couple hours on its own, I'm just going to cover a few of the areas where we see the most common problems. And these problems occur from, you'd be surprised, from the biggest ETF issuers out there. We see it a lot, and we're in there trying to create best practices for them all the time. So Title tags. This is low-hanging fruit. Way back when, I used to work on a newspaper and I was a pretty good headline writer. So I understand when you've written that great, clever title. These days, however, if you want good SEO, you need to combine that ability to be clever with the ability to put an important keyword in there. This is probably the most common challenge. We see this a lot. You have to step back from the content. Does my title even mention the sector or the ETF in it? Or is it so generic it could be used for anything, and ultimately it's just lost in the shuffle with a million other articles. We saw Alex's had some titles in there, very specific details in them, RIAs, invest in gold, the ETF ecosystem. This helps search engines tremendously. The next item to think about is content value and length. As a general rule, you'll see longer the content, the higher the ranking, but that can be a little misleading. Actually, the longer content is probably providing some really good value. Now you have people linking to it, sharing it. It's building up SEO signals. So when you're targeting a keyword, you want to look at what others who are ranking on that keyword are doing, and then try to do a much better job. Again, just a general philosophy you should have. Good content is important to SEO. I mean, this is why, you know, blog articles and everything work so well, is because it's a good opportunity for you to both be topical but provide some real value to people that they're looking for. Next item to think about, again, we see this a lot, is how fast does your site load on mobile? Is it a good user experience? One of the factors the SEO algorithms look at is dwell time. The amount of time from when you click on a search result to when you click back to the search results. Low dwell time sends a signal that your content isn't of value for someone who's searched that keyword. Well, reality could be that they're on a mobile device and your site is taking forever to load, so they press the back button and they bug out quickly, or it's, you know, a bad user experience of some type like that. So take a close look at your analytics, look at page load times, look at how long people are spending with the site. Ultimately, how engaged are they? The average load time or session duration for ETF providers and financial advisors for organic traffic is 1.5 minutes for reference. So,
and when it comes to keywords,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when it comes to keywords, you know, that's a difficult space. What suggestions would you maybe have for the audience to pick the right keywords?
So yeah, that's very tricky. So if you're going after a long tail keyword, you know, that might be a lot easier than something really short. So like, you know, ETF is going to be, you know, impossible. But something like, you know, junior gold miners ETF, you know, something like that. Maybe that's a little bit more longer tail. But there's a lot of different signals that go into keywords. As you can see from this graphic here, every keyword has its own difficulty. Some are more valuable than others. If you look at that image, it's scoring a keyword as medium difficulty. It's giving us data on volume, estimated cost per click. And remember, some keywords have more importance to your business than others, so you have to think about that business value as well. On this next image, though, this again shows you. You can see that it almost looks like stock ticker information. You know, these are all related to keywords, all with different signals, all looking for a variety of different metrics, you know, that are going to tell you whether there's an opportunity here or not. You know, what's the most important thing that we can go after, you know, is really what kind of impact can we get for our SEO time, for our efforts. So we're looking, is this an easy keyword? Is this a hard keyword? Again, and then thinking about what's the business value here for spending the time and effort that we're going to going after that keyword. So SEO,
you know, that's a really great analogy.
Yeah, and SEO, you know, a lot of our clients, you know, they're producing blogs constantly, and it's a great opportunity for you to insert keywords in there that, you know, maybe you're focused on, you know, one fund, but there could be about 20 different iterations of keywords about that fund that you could kind of sprinkle through different blog articles to really hit on all those. So the other side of search engine marketing is paid search, or PPC, which stands for pay-per-click. Launching new content for SEO is a slow process. It takes time to rank. If you're launching a new fund, for example, you can't wait, you need momentum. So how else can you create that buzz for that content? This gets us to PPC. So because SEO takes time, a new fund isn't going to get to the top of the search engines overnight in the organic search results. It may take months or even years, depending on how competitive the keyword is. This is why PPC is the first place that we, like to start. So for example, I mentioned, if you're launching a new junior gold miners ETF with paid search, you can pay to play and put your product on top of the search engines anytime someone is searching junior gold miners ETF. So it's immediate. It's also low funnel. The person searching that keyword, junior gold miners ETF, knows exactly what they want. You're much more likely to close this person than someone searching just gold ETF, and you're much more likely to close them than someone searching best ETF. So you can get into those low funnel searches immediately, and PPC works. We see correlations time and time again between ad spend and asset growth, especially when conditions are right. So this is kind of describing the simplest form of PPC, which is putting up an ad on the keyword you want, but it's very nuanced. For instance, you can be the first listing in the search ads to come up, but also be paying considerably less than the competitors in the second, third, or fourth positions. This is due to optimization. So there are a variety of levers you can pull, different bidding algorithms you can use. I've been doing this since it was invented. As Mike said, PPC specifically, literally I was in it within weeks after it was invented. That was 20 years ago. So if you're jumping into it the first time, understand that you're going up against people like me, people like my colleagues who are in accounts every day, constantly optimizing. It's competitive. PPC also isn't like, say, something like installing carpeting, where the skills that worked maybe 5-10 years ago still apply today. It's always evolving. Something changes every couple of weeks. So consider also that this is, a live auction. It's very fluid. So it's not something you can set and forget. We're constantly grinding away at the data and trying to improve. And if you aren't, your competitors are. PPC can also be expensive, although you can set your budget. So really, whatever you're comfortable with. A lot of our clients, they start at a conservative number and grow from there. But it's a great value. One of the things we love about PPC is that it can be this very low funnel marketing environment. People are often searching exactly what they want, and with ETFs, often making that decision pretty quickly. So it's an excellent place to start with when you want to drive more traffic. One other thing to keep in mind in PPC is relevancy. This is really important for any digital marketing, but for paid search, there are algorithms that come to play and impact things. So as a general rule, you want your keyword to match your ad copy, and you want your ad copy to match to a relevant landing page. Any disconnect there among those can really cause problems, and your prices in the auctions will get jacked up. There's quality scores that come to play there as well. So measurement is tricky in this space. An ideal scenario is like an e-commerce site. Fund marketing can have some commonalities with e-commerce, but one of the ways it does not is attribution. We don't have that in sale, result data. With our e-commerce clients, we can track every penny and every dollar on PPC back to every dollar in revenue. With mutual funds and ETFs, users will come to the site, do some research, and then they leave to go make a purchase. Once they leave, we can't track that in sale. But what we do see, as I mentioned, is that our best days in paid search often correlate with our best flows and asset growth days. Additionally, when we get aggressive at the right time, our growth outpaces competitors in this sector. So here's a chart to look at. This is Robinhood data. So this site, Robinhood used to provide data to on how many people would hold certain ETFs. In this graphic, the green line is their account holders, Robinhood account holders. So you can see that the green line saw slow growth. It was relatively flat. It grew a little bit, but right when it starts to rise for this fund is when we got aggressive with our spending. We got after it. We throttled way up. The data looked good, and we stayed with it for an extended period of time. And you can just see the massive number of account holders increase. So during that time, because we timed our aggressiveness well, we outpaced every competitor in this sector by a considerable margin. And this is just data from Robinhood. So, you can think about that as well with like, Charles Schwab or some of the other places. So if you want to target just Robinhood or just a Charles Schwab, or RAs or active traders with a high net worth, programmatic advertising is another one of these tools in the digital marketing toolbox to push your content. So this is one you definitely need an agency for. We work with a platform that won't consider, working directly with anyone. You have to go through an agency to access the platform. But what programmatic can consist of is native ads. If you've done a nice piece of content and you want exposure, running it with an ad with other similar content can drive traffic. Programmatic also consists of connected TV, so your smart TV or your Roku or Hulu subscription where you see TV ads. Programmatic can also consist of video placements, your typical pre-roll, and also banner display ads. So pretty standard digital advertising. But the benefits of programmatic is in its unique audience targeting. What we like is that instead of targeting, say, a placement on a site, you are often targeting an individual. I know that someone is a Charles Schwab account holder, and I also have data that shows they're an active trader or high net worth investor. All these things can come together in a sort of Venn diagram of targeting to really pinpoint an individual. So maybe I show this person a native ad and they see the content, come to the site about the new fund you're launching. I can then follow this up with a CTV ad specifically on their TV. Programmatic is not as inexpensive as SEO. The minimums are higher entry point than with PPC. You're probably looking at a minimum of $10K a month to start. We're working on some products and services that'll lower that, so definitely ask if that's an issue. But the real advantage here is these blends of audiences that we can create. This is really the future of digital marketing. This allows us, when we run a CTV ad, to target just one household in a neighborhood, even if they were all watching the same program, because we are targeting just an individual. So while the minimums may be higher here, ultimately it's more inexpensive than you might think because of how specific we can target with programmatic. As mentioned, content doesn't have to be just written. Like Alex showed, you have infographics, you have video. Video can be effective. It can also play well with your written content. A video on the same page that highlights key points or goes into depth can be really useful, but we really like YouTube advertising. A couple of things we like about YouTube. We conducted a number of brand lift studies to look at some of our clients' ads and how they perform against their own ads, so split tests. And we also studied how brand recall compared to their competitors, so surveying people. Do you remember our brand versus a competitor, to really look at the effectiveness on YouTube, to give us a little bit more in-depth data than you might see on just the ad platform. So these are expensive studies, but we know from these that the value is there for YouTube if you target the right audiences. I'm not going to give away all of our secrets here, but I'm going to give you a couple good ones. So you can see custom intent audiences and retargeting. These are really good audiences to target. Think about the value though here. You can show someone a video on your ETF for 2 to 6 cents per view. We're actually usually below that. And depending on the length, you might get 50% of the people to watch the whole video. If that's targeted correctly, that's tremendous value. Where it really gets interesting is the longer videos. If I have a 5-minute video and I'm paying 2 cents per view and say only 25% finish that 5-minute video, while you're paying 8 cents for someone to watch an entire 5-minute video about your product, to have their attention that long, especially to explain a new product or a complicated fund, it's hard to beat that. So we like YouTube, especially if you can target bottom of the funnel users, which you can. So consider retargeting as a good option here. If someone comes to your site, views a page about a specific fund, next time they're on YouTube, you put a video or two in front of them, you're pushing them down the funnel effectively. You can also design your own custom audiences based on search intent, meaning someone has shown interest in a specific sector. You can target that person with YouTube videos. So if they typed in that gold keyword, and later they're on YouTube, you can now charge them. And something people don't realize is that if you press skip on your videos, you aren't paying for that. If it's longer than 30 seconds, your video, and someone only watches 29 seconds, you don't have to pay for that. So if you're looking to create buzz about a topic, get them, charged up about your ETF, you can get a lot of impressions and a lot of views, and it's a pretty affordable way to drive eyeballs to your content. And we've really seen YouTube in the past year really become kind of a major force as far as when people are making decisions about buying a product.
Absolutely.
So social media, content and digital marketing go hand in hand, but the marriage between social media and content is pretty obvious. If you build a new piece of content, you're likely going to post it, to drive some traffic, but often just doing that is not going to be anywhere near as effective as if you put some ad dollars behind that and put that content in front of some very targeted audiences on a consistent basis. Suddenly that content sees more engagement, more sharing, more traffic, as to things like your videos or your infographics, which are also shared a lot. Like Alex showed that one. It's a perfect type of graphic where you might see social media shares on, and it comes to life with social media ad buys. So some content will be more effective than others. You always want to be producing content. When you find those good ones, you really want to lean into those. We're constantly running ads and promoting stuff that works, throttling back stuff that doesn't, and helping build that following and build that traffic. And this in turn is really important for your SEO. You're building SEO signals when you're doing this. The most common platforms we serve, I know this was a question earlier, Facebook, LinkedIn, Reddit, and Twitter. Each has different nuances in its targeting. But social media, particularly paid search in this category, it's an important part of any robust content marketing strategy. So you may want to choose one platform over another depending on the content. Some platforms like Reddit, may be better for targeting retail investors. LinkedIn, it's about professionals. So if you want to reach RIAs, for example, you can do some very specific targeting there. Overall, in getting the most out of your content, we find that our most successful clients, the ones that we see climbing up the ladder of AUM, they're typically combining all these platforms and tactics in some intelligent fashion, and then they grow into them. And if they're just doing some basics to start, we meet them there where they're at, and we build a plan to get them to best practices, and then ultimately from there get them to leading edge.
Wow, I don't know how the audience feels, but that was a lot. Stephen and Alex, I now feel like this little girl, this super heroine that can just literally take on the challenge that is ahead of us as marketers in the financial marketing space. So we do want to get to some of the questions. So I'm going to move quickly here. Again, if you want to get in touch with us, our contact info is here. You can use the little web shot or web screenshot to take a picture of that. And then you've made it. Everyone that's on as an attendee right now will be in our raffle for our offer, and Alex and I will get in touch with you later on that. So one question for you here, maybe this one, the screenshots, Stephen, that you showed for the keywords, where were the screenshots taken from? Well, or maybe even what tools do you use?
So yeah, we use a lot of tools, and you may have different needs. So that one in particular, that was Ahrefs. But yeah, there are a variety of different SEO tools out there. Like most tools, it's often only as good as the experience, of using them and understanding what that all means, and knowing that, what is medium, hard, what does all that really mean? What to try and get on one of those tough keywords that you're ranking on. There's a lot of different efforts. So we always have an idea of how much effort it'll take for each of these keywords just by kind of glancing sometimes at these signals.
Definitely a lot of science and art there. Maybe, Alex, this question could be for you. Which kind of, or what kind of info would you recommend to post for a recently established hedge fund? Like what sites and also what social media platform?
So for hedge funds in particular, you know, there's a site, there's a social, well, a pseudo social media site called Harvest, which posts a lot of fund manager commentaries and a lot of kind of more higher level academic pieces. You know, the world of hedge funds is obviously a little bit different, very different target audience. You know, I don't know how many hedge fund managers are looking for ideas on Facebook. So I would recommend Harvest for longer form pieces. I would recommend Twitter with the caveat that you're also kind of dealing with more retail. And then with regards to LinkedIn, you know, posting to specific hedge fund or more kind of higher institutional level groups.
And then Steve, well, from the programmatic side of the house, if you wanted to target hedge fund investors, would it be possible to also leverage programmatic for something like that?
Possibly. I think, you know, with COVID, some of our targeting has been a little bit limited on things we can do in programmatic side. Yeah, for sure. You can really target down to different, you know, job titles, different things that people are doing. We can target, you know, it used to be like a convention or something. If there's something really specific, we could target anyone who attended that. So there's a lot of different ways you can kind of go at things with programmatic for sure.
Yeah, if you're looking to try to target hedge fund investors. Additional plugins, as Rich Neal is asking, currently we're using Yoast for our SEO. Are there any other WordPress plugins you'd recommend instead?
Instead, now I think that will keep you with the basics. Most of the plugins, they're pretty solid as far as, you know, kind of reminding you of sort of the low-hanging fruit in there. So yeah, Yoast is perfectly fine. Just, you know, make sure you're using, you know, and not ignoring it.
That I think is the biggest key for sure. So we're going to keep the Q&A running. It looks like folks are you know, quite interested in some of the questions. Again, if you have another specific question you want to ask to hear from Stephen and Alex, please, you know, drop it in the Q&A and we'll get to them. Also, you know, Dave, if I've missed any and you want to highlight a question that I might have missed, feel free to run it through. One of the other questions here is, before a launch, how far in advance do you recommend starting to develop the content? And then when it comes to getting that return from SEO, like how long in advance do you need to start with that?
Well, yeah, for SEO, I can start on the SEO side. But yeah, it takes some time for SEO. There have been, you know, times where we've come in, we spotted like just major problems with the site, and you can fix things like that and you can see lift. But typically, you know, on a macro level on SEO, you're kind of looking at like a, you know, 6 months down the road or a year down the road to really see that growth. So, you know, we want to be always looking back and looking at, you know, are we improving? Because SEO is kind of like a, you know, it's like a giant flywheel where you're giving a little bit push, little bit of push, little bit of push. It starts picking up, you know, with all those little pushes, they kind of add to it, and it's going faster and faster, and you're getting that momentum. So if you've already got good momentum coming into your SEO from your site, launching a new piece is going to take a lot less time than if you know, don't have that momentum. We just had a client we launched that launched a new fund, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. Within a few days, they were actually on the top of the search engine for their specific keyword. But that's because of all the other signals that we have been working on. It was, you know, more of a niche that was doable versus like if it was, you know, S&P 500 ETF or something that you're launching that, you know, that's going to take like a long time to cut through all the everybody else out there. But yeah, so there's a few different things that go into it for SEO, but we're always thinking, you know, long term. But if you've got that flywheel rolling and you're plugging in some new content, you can see fairly quick results. But we want to be part of that process, you know, so that we keep that momentum going.
Got it. And Alex, what do you suggest?
I would say, you know, from the back end, so the content ideation side, the production, the creating the content, all that stuff, you know, in a perfect world, you give yourself about 2.5 to 3 months before our fund launch. And that really gives you time to think through what are the pieces we want to have leading up to the launch, if we have, if we've exemptive relief, we're not in the quiet period anymore, we can start talking about the product. That's going to come into play with your content calendar timeline, but you really want to give yourself a few months to think about the pieces you want before launch, the pieces you want to disseminate on launch, and then down the road, the different milestones that you want to hit, both from a timely and trend angle. So yeah, about 2.5, 3 months.
Excellent, excellent. Here's a pro tip for those still that are left online. Yes, because of the quiet period and compliance, you may not be able to speak about the specific fund or use the name of the fund, but working with your compliance team, you may be able to start to create content around a specific strategy, and not referring to the product itself, but more about the investment strategy. And so you can start to generate the SEO from there. So again, the sooner the better from both the SEO and the content side of the house. We still have a few that are with us here today. I'm going to keep rolling with the questions, if that's okay with you. Given the current market environment, what's changed? I guess both, Alex, do you want to address from the content side and even maybe in the news media with the current market environment, what's changed? And then Stephen, maybe from digital disruption and SEO, if you want to tackle that question.
Yeah,
absolutely. So, it's been a very interesting 12 months. We've seen a lot of changes. I would say, broadly speaking, the biggest change we've seen in the world of ETFs is the amount of retail investors, particularly millennial investors, that have jumped into the market. And I really think that that's something that marketing departments need to be paying a lot of attention to. Going back a couple months, what was happening with GameStop and what was happening on Reddit, what was happening with the hedge funds. I think the biggest takeaway is that, the world of investing has changed dramatically. It's not just for high net worth people. It's not just about Wall Street anymore. It's about Main Street. And fund marketers need to really adapt to what that means. And what that means is putting content together that is digestible for the everyday user. I think that's really the biggest change. Also, the fact that people are getting their financial news on Twitter. People are getting their financial news on Reddit. I don't think that's something that anybody would have been able to predict 20 years ago. Most of what was happening then was behind closed door meetings. It was only happening on the upper levels of a Wall Street building. But I think the biggest sea change that we've seen is younger investors are getting into the game, more women investors are getting into the game. And I really think it's on the fund marketers to really be paying attention to the fact that the way people are consuming their news is changing dramatically, and they need to be there to react to that.
Yeah, and I think, so last year we saw a lot of younger investors dipping their toes in. You saw Robinhood account holders go way up. If you're nimble, it was a great opportunity. Trust me. Programmatic, we targeted Robinhood holders specifically, with some specific funds, and you saw that chart. We saw a lot of that. So, with our clients, you saw anyone who really was stayed aggressive last year, for sure, during all these changes, they came out the other side way better. Yeah, we were definitely aggressive during that time. We were definitely paying attention to the trends like those young investors. And another change too, so much activity, has moved online. So we're consuming way more video than before. YouTube is becoming, like I mentioned, much more influential in purchase decisions. So obviously, people learning about different products, different strategies, a lot of video consumption.
Perfect, great response. So let's keep going with it. The questions keep coming in here. This one is in particular to budget. So perhaps what is a recommended minimum viable annual budget for, say, a small asset manager when it comes to targeting the financial professionals specifically for a from a digital marketing standpoint? Stephen, do you want to tackle that one?
Yes. So, I guess, it depends on how many products and how much content you want to promote. So we do have clients, if on the small side might be like 25K a year as far as ad spend, something like that. And if you want to target professionals, you can do some really efficient stuff. It just depends. So how many products, are we promoting, or are we targeting, specific geo targets too around an area? You want to hit high net worth investors around this certain area, something like that. but yeah, I think, some of our bigger clients obviously are spending millions and millions a year, but yeah, some of our smaller clients, you might be around like that 25K would give us at least, we want data too to work with as well. So, I mean, that's really key is that, if the data is trickling in, it takes us a lot more to optimize, a lot more time. But if we're getting a decent flow, then we can, really fine tune much faster.
Very cost effective. That's great. And then Alex, from your standpoint, what would you say?
Yeah, again, like Steven said, it really depends. It depends on how many products, you're trying to push. Obviously, if you have marketing budget just to go after one product, or if you have to diversify that marketing budget to support multiple products. But I would say, we have some of our larger clients, easily spending hundreds of thousands a year on content. I'm speaking more of the content creation side of things. I would say that for a small asset manager, maybe 4,000 to 5,000 a month is what you could be looking at if you want a very aggressive content campaign. With, again, the caveat being, if you're tight on time and if you're tight on money, think about how to repurpose that content. Once it's gone through compliance, once your internal people have reviewed it, how many different ways can you squeeze out the uses for that content piece? So in a perfect world, clients have an unlimited budget and, can easily spend $5,000 to $6,000, $7,000 a month on content. The reality is that everybody has, they're strapped for time and they're strapped for resources. So what I always tell clients is, I'm happy to discuss what a budget with you looks like, but let's also talk about ways that you can get more out of your pieces, so that, you don't have to spend so much time reinventing the wheel every single time.
Perfect. Yeah, those are great responses. Another similar question, and this could even be kind of a roadmap question, at least for the budget. So anyway, similar question to the minimum budget, but so with a limited budget and marketing resources, if you had to just pick one, right, what would you consider the most bang for your buck? Alex, do you want to start?
That's a really tough question because it calls into question things we haven't talked about on our call today. So on the content marketing side, I would say that a blog strategy, I think that's, at least at our agency, what we've seen really resonates with people in terms of increasing their traffic. Another thing to think about, which again, I'm kind of throwing a new concept in because we haven't talked about it today, but does dovetail nicely into content marketing, is public relations. So again, repurposing your content pieces to become pitches so that when your PR team or your internal communications team is going out to the press, getting them to talk about your products, getting them on the Wall Street Journal, on CNBC to mention your ticker, getting a backlink back to your site. That's another way to really think about squeezing out every additional dollar on your content budget.
Perfect.
Yeah,
excellent.
So for us, I'm gonna sort of cheat and say search engine marketing, which could include SEO and PPC, just because they kind of go hand in hand in some ways. SEO will take longer. You will get your most bang for your buck doing that probably, but PPC, it's so immediate. You learn a lot about the keywords, how effective they are. So I would just say search engine marketing is really the first place we like to start. We have an ascension plan, kind of in place in this category. It's like, we want you to start here, and then if we see that doing well and you see it doing well and you see assets growing, then hey, let's move to here, let's here. And so, our biggest clients, we've kind of walked through all that kind of plan with them and just build from the ground up. But usually we start in the search engine marketing.
Yeah, I think that's the one for sure. Particularly given your point about those that are in market, and if someone's looking for a specific search word, that's who you want to get in front of. That was great. We are so thankful. You've been extremely generous with your time to our audience. Alex, thank you so much for all the insights that you shared with us today. Steven, likewise. And again, to our audience, we really appreciate it. There is going to be a replay. It will be made available so you can watch through this again. And if you have any questions on content creation strategy, positioning, branding, videos, PPC, programmatic, social media, any doubts out there, we really want to help. So any insights we can share with you, we'd love to do that. So again, thank you so much for your time, and look for the replay. Please fill out the feedback form. Again, there's no limit to better. There's only one way for us to get better, is from the feedback that you give us. So until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.